Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Lessons in leadership. Boy, this is a salient topic. I mean, it's always a salient topic, but particularly in these sad times with what's happened in the last week. Sully Sullenberger, the heroic pilot of the Miracle on the Hudson, has an op-ed in the Washington Post talking about exactly that. We have lost what in the military we would call unit cohesion, writes Sullenberger. The fabric of our nation is under attack, while shame, a timeless beacon of right and wrong, seems dead. Interesting. It's a great segue, and the timing of this book couldn't be more on point. Myth and Reality is the name of the book. Retired four-star General Stanley McChrystal is the author of the book, and it's really an interesting approach to an examination of leadership because he does profiles of a whole range of names that you know from the annals of history, but they're not all heroes. That's one of the interesting things that strikes me about this book is there are things to learn about leadership from people who had great leadership skills and use them to evil ends. It's sort of like the smart guy bias. Oh, if somebody's smart, they must be good. Somebody can't be smart and bad. Right. Sure they can.
Yeah, they can.
Sure they can. You can be smart and diabolical. So I'm really interested to hear more about the philosophy behind this book that General McChrystal has written. General Stanley McChrystal joins us now. General, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Just the genesis, I mean, obviously a retired four-star general, the connection to leadership in a big organization is obvious, but why you decided to write about this and in the format that you chose, profiling leaders from the annals of history, as I mentioned.
Absolutely. I'd spent a lifetime being taught leadership and then trying to practice it, and then after I retired from the military, I had written a couple books, my memoirs, and another book, Team of Teams. But I realized through all of this that I didn't think I and my two co-authors felt the same. We didn't understand the actual essence of leadership. So we went back to Plutarch, the Greek historian who profiled a number of Greek and Roman leaders and did the original biographies to figure out what have we got wrong. And what we came out with is really this revelation that leadership isn't what we think it is, and it never has been. What we have done is we have oversimplified it. We've made it two-dimensional, and we have fallen into viewing historical figures through these myths of how leaders are, and we sand off the edges of people in history. We look at them in a different way, and we tell their story in a very incomplete manner. And what that does is it makes us ineffective looking forward. It makes us ineffective in who we select, who we elect, who we promote, who we follow, how we think about leadership. And it's got huge costs for society.
Well, yeah, looking back 2,000 years as a starting point, that's a pretty broad perspective. It's great.
It's a big homework assignment. So you profiled 13 famous leaders from a wide range of eras and fields. Who is your favorite leader or somebody that you admire?
It's interesting. After we did the 13th, I would have started the book with Robert E. Lee because he was someone who, through my life, was a role model. Mm-hmm. By the time we finished the book, the leader that I most admired, not just for his cause but for his skills, was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., because we tend to think that he gave a speech in 1963 with I Have a Dream. But the reality is for 13 years, he brought together the disparate parts of the civil rights movement. He forged them into a nonviolent, disciplined campaign that was really an extraordinary management and leadership feat separate from the inspirational part that he did.
You also profile people who committed unspeakable acts of evil. Tell us why you did that.
Well, it's interesting. First, you take Maximilien Robespierre, who was the primary figure in the French Revolution.
Reign of Terror.
And he absolutely. In a 5-week period in 1794, they guillotined 900 people. So much that they had to move the guillotine out of the center of the city because blood was making the water supply bad. But here's a guy who, he was this introverted lawyer who sat in his room and wrote speeches. He never went to an execution until his own. And so he did it in a a theoretical way, and he was trying to push his society towards a truly virtuous society. And yet he became convinced that you had to follow a route of terror to get there. And if you think about it, that's kind of amazing, but he got a lot of traction. We paired him with Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who led al-Qaeda in Iraq, who was very different, much less intellectual, poorly educated, but they shared this white-hot zealotry, this ability to seem completely confident in their belief, completely committed. And because of that, the people were attracted to them, almost like if these people believe so fervently and have so few doubts, they must be right. And that's an interesting psychological look at followers, why we would follow people like that.
I also wanted to get just quickly your take on individuals you profile who had very different public personas from their private life, and one of them being Walt Disney.
Sure, Walt Disney spent his life trying to be Uncle Walt, and he really wanted to be. He wanted to be a much beloved figure. But when it came to leading a larger organization, he struggled with that, and the bureaucracy made him a more distant, a more difficult person to be around. And so there was a real distance between what he, I think, wanted to be genuinely and what he was as a leader.
He is General Stanley McChrystal, retired 4-star U.S. Army general. The book, Leaders, Myth, and Reality. Very interesting. General McChrystal, thanks so much for joining us. Good luck with the book.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you.
And hope to have you back soon. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning.